Today we're diving deep into a piece of gear that has the home theater world buzzing since the launch, the Anthem AVM70 8K processor. The Anthem AVM70 8K receives high praise for its outstanding performance and the precision of Anthem room correction. But the big question remains, does it really live up to the hype, and is it still viable in 2024? In this video, I'll be sharing my personal experience with the AVM70 8K over the past 3 months in my home theater. Now before we dive in, I want to give a big thanks to our sponsor, Arendal Sound, for their unwavering support of this channel. Arendal Sound is preparing to launch their new 1528 series. Arendal says the name 1528 holds a special place in our hearts. It references the year that Arendal was first mentioned in historical records as Arendelle, a name that inspired the magical kingdom in Frozen. We don't have much information other than they will be bigger, better, and more luxurious than anything Arendal Sound has created to date. I'm looking forward to experiencing the new 1528 series here on the Youthman channel. Over the past 12 years, I've journeyed through various home theater processors in my home theater. I began with the Emotiva UMC-1. Now this was the first affordable processor as it cost around $500 in 2012. It was quite buggy, so I went back to using an AVR in my home theater. This included the Yamaha RXV 1800, Onkyo TX SR703, Harman Kardon AVR 3600, a Marantz SR8012, and an SR8015. Now 5 years ago, I decided to give separates another shot. I upgraded my Marantz SR8015 AVR to the Marantz AV7705 processor, and then later its successor, the AV7706. Now both the AV7705 and the AV7706, they provided rock solid performance and were easy to set up with Odyssey XT32. I've also reviewed the Monolith HTP1 and Emotiva's RMC-1. Now until now, the only Anthem product that I've reviewed was the MRX 1120 AVR, which many of you felt was just a glimpse of what Anthem processors can truly offer. So with your recommendations, I decided to put the Anthem AVM70 8K to the test and see if it indeed offers a significant upgrade over my Marantz AV7706. Now I want to give a big thanks to Audio Advice for lending me the AVM70 8K to review for you guys. I'll have a link to it down in the description below. Now aesthetically, the AVM70 8K is absolutely gorgeous. The front panel features a very minimalistic design with a matte black finish. It's super clean with a large glass display on the left, a volume knob, 6 small buttons, and a headphone jack. Now the monochromatic LCD display, however, is a bit misleading. What appears to be a massive LCD display that takes up half of the unit is really only a small fraction of the glass front, as you can see here. I do like how the font is large and easy to read from your main listening position. Within the Anthem app, there are a lot of settings that you can adjust for the LCD panel. So if you go into the settings, setup menu, general, and then scroll down to display, you can set things like the time duration for the unit to go into standby mode. You can also choose what information you want displayed on the LCD panel, adjust its brightness from 0 to 100%, and more. Now the Anthem app is one of the most robust and feature-rich Now the Anthem app is one of the most robust and feature-rich apps that I've ever used. The app is very modern, and the animations within the various menus are incredibly smooth. It's also very intuitive, and the menus are laid out very well and easy to navigate. All right, so here we are inside the Anthem app. So up here at the top left, we got the power button. So that's turning the unit on. Over to the right of that, we can easily select our inputs. Here you can see we've got Kaleidoscape that I mentioned earlier, but then further down you can see some virtual inputs that I created called Kaleidoscape Night. Over to the right of that, we can click on the Dolby Surround and you'll see some different presets there. You've got Dolby Surround, Anthem Logic Music, Anthem Logic Cinema. You can set it to none. Then you've got your DTS settings as well, all channel stereo, mono, and so forth. So we'll put that back to Dolby Surround. Now I really like the smoothness of the volume right here. You can either click and drag, or to fine tune it, you can click the plus and the minus keys. Now one thing I wish that Anthem would enable is if you click on the plus and hold it, nothing happens. Same thing with the negative. If I click and hold, nothing happens. It'd be nice to be able to click and hold that and gradually increase or decrease that volume, but not a big deal there. Below that, we can hit the mute button at the bottom left, turn that on or off, and you can even turn on or off Anthem Room Correction by toggling this selection right here. So I really like what Anthem has done on this homepage. It just makes it super clean, easy to use, and you have the functions that you most are going to use primarily. So we've got zone 1, we've got zone 2. In my setup, I don't have a zone 2, but I want to take you into the settings. So inside the settings, you're going to see it's just laid out really nice, super clean, and I also want you to notice the transitions when I click on an item here. So right here on the main settings, we can bump up or decrease things like your bass, treble, subwoofer, your fronts, all of your speakers in your setup. Up at the very top, let's go ahead and click on Setup Menu. Now in here, this is where you have a lot of control directly from your phone or from your tablet using the Anthem app. If we go under General, you can see we've got lots of things that we can do. We can name it. We can adjust, of course, the language and the distance and so forth, whether you want what I call a relative scale in volume or an absolute. And here they call it a percentage or a dB. Down here under the display, here's where you have all of those options on the front of the display, how you want that set up. And here I've got it set to turn off after 2 hours of no use, and just some different options there. The wake up brightness, I like having it fully bright, but then I want it dimming as low as it can go. So I found 2% was as low as it would allow me to do under this front panel brightness. If I went to 1%, it just shut it off. So I leave it at 2%. That way when it's not in use, it's at its lowest dim possible. Down here under main zone, you can select the power on volume. When you first boot it up, what do you want that initial volume to be? In my case, I have it about -30, and then I can bump it up to around -20 when I'm ready to watch the movies. You can even set a max volume. Like I would rather not go above 0 dB. I know that's plenty of volume in my setup, but you can set that to your own liking. We got more options down here for zone 2, your mute controls, and even CEC if you want to use the Anthem to control some different things in your setup and under the CEC power control. In my case, I don't need it to control anything, so we leave those settings off. Back on the main screen, we can go under speakers, and here are those presets that I created during ARC when we actually set that up and calibrated it. We've got the default, but then I also created a profile called Boost and one called No Subs. And again, if we take a look at that, if say for instance I click on No Subs, you can just see when I scroll down here, this subwoofer is turned off right up here at the top. We've got that set to none. So here's just where you can get creative. You can turn on and off certain speakers. You can set certain parameters. Here you could change different settings on the subwoofers themselves if you need that. Change your crossovers for the subwoofers, levels, and so forth. So this is just where you can get really, really creative and set some customized presets to easily be able to switch back and forth between those. Under channel mapping, that's where you're going to set up your, or maybe even change your layout. If you've got in-ceiling speakers, so here you can see in my setup, I've got 2 front in-ceiling speakers and I've got 2 rear in-ceiling speakers. I don't have a height 3, I don't have like center Atmos speakers. So you can see the diagram below represents what I have physically here in my dedicated theater room. So we'll go ahead and back up again. Under inputs, again, here's where you can just get really creative. Here you can see I've got Kaleidoscape, an Apple TV, Arvolution, a PS5, but then I've got some virtual inputs down here. I've got Apple TV Music, I've got an Apple TV night, a Kaleidoscape night. And if we jump into, say, for instance, the Kaleidoscape night, here's where you see that I've selected the no subs profile right here. So that tells Anthem when I'm using Kaleidoscape night to use this particular profile to turn off my subs so that my wife isn't disturbed while she is sleeping. Again, a lot of customization there. The one thing I would love to see Anthem add to this screen right here is the ability to sort these. Let's say, for instance, if I wanted to move Kaleidoscape night right directly underneath Kaleidoscape up here, I don't believe you can do that, or at least I have not been able to figure that out. I've clicked and hold, and you can't drag. If you go into here, there's not a sort option on there. So Anthem, we would love to have that ability to be able to move those up and down. Now it does appear that when you're first creating it, it'll allow you to insert that. See this red dot or this red text up here that says insert before input. So if you're creating a new one, you can tell it which one you're wanting to input, but we don't have the ability to move that after the fact. Again, at least not from what I can see. Now there's not much to see under network. That's just all of your internet and how that's connected to it. But under store, load, and update, this is where you can back up all the settings that you have and save that. Or maybe if you want to load some settings that you have, I would think, let's say for instance, if for whatever reason you ended up buying a second one, maybe for another room, and you wanted to utilize the same settings that you've got, say here in my theater room, then we could back that up, load them onto the second device without having to reprogram all of that from scratch. So overall, I absolutely love this app. It's super slick, and even the animations, you can just see how smooth the pans are from one screen to the next. And again, about the only time that I ever have any issues is if I'm switching to another input. For some reason, it doesn't like that every once in a while, and it will just crash. And so it just closes the app, and then I just have to reopen the app. Not a big deal, but it is frustrating at times. I love how during a movie, I can actually be tweaking the settings within the app without having any on-screen distractions. There's nothing more frustrating to my wife than me pulling up an on-screen display to make some settings to the sound or maybe even the video while we're watching a movie. When I first set up the AVM70 8K, my family and I sat down to watch our weekly episode of Survivor. Shortly after the movie began, my daughter Rachel said, "Dad, something seems off. Their lips don't line up with what they're saying." I too had noticed it myself, and in the background, I was already making adjustments to the lip sync. Having that ability to make those changes discreetly is awesome. Overall, I absolutely love the Anthem app. It works very well, but it does crash quite a bit and closes abruptly. It seems to do this most when I'm switching inputs. Now, speaking of inputs, the AVM70 8K has 7 HDMI inputs for all of your audio and video components, but in addition to that, you can also create virtual inputs. Now, here's an example of that. I created a virtual input called Kaleidoscape Night. And so for this input, I created a speaker profile called No Subs. So when I select Kaleidoscape Night, the preset, it uses the No Subs option to turn off my subwoofers so as to not disturb Jessica when she's sleeping. I also created a boost profile that bumps up the trims on my subs so that I can easily switch between more or less bass during a movie or when listening to music. I can see lots of applications for this feature. You could set up a virtual input for, let's say, when you're listening to 2-channel music. Maybe you prefer your subs to be turned on and you want to use Anthem Logic Music preset to utilize your surround sound speakers. The virtual inputs of the AVM70 provide huge flexibility. Now, the AVM70 8K uses their proprietary ARC Genesis Anthem room correction software. Now, when I initially ran ARC, the bass was a bit underwhelming. This is pretty common with even other room correction software. Now, it definitely took some tweaking, but now I'm very pleased with the bass performance of the AVM70 8K. And for those of you that love to dive deep into room correction, Arc Genesis offers significantly more control than your basic Odyssey XT32 does. I have a dedicated video on the Arc calibration and setup that I'll link to at the end of this video, as well as down in the description below. But suffice it to say, I thoroughly enjoy the sound from the AVM70 8K. Each channel is precise and detailed and provides a very smooth and immersive experience in my home theater. Now, in addition to movies, concerts sound phenomenal as well. While listening to Sting's concert on Kaleidoscape, the drums are tight and punchy. Vocals are upfront and clear, and the crowd sounds authentic and really places you in the audience. And after calibration, I discovered that Arc calibrates to a much higher volume than Odyssey does. With Odyssey, I typically listen to around -10 dB. With the Anthem AVM70 8K, I'm around -20 dB. I always wondered why the Anthem owners would share that they can't ever see themselves watching content at 0 dB. Typically, 0 dB on the volume is going to be considered what we refer to as reference volume. However, 0 dB on the AVM70 8K would really be around ear-bleeding level and not a pleasant experience. Another issue I have is audio dropouts. Now, I'm still troubleshooting this issue, so I don't want to put the blame solely on the Anthem just yet. It could be an HDMI cable. It only seems to happen with Kaleidoscape. It doesn't happen with my Apple TV or my 4K player. I've already replaced the HDMI cable between the Kaleidoscape and the Anthem AVM70 8K. At first it seemed to resolve the issue, but the other night while watching Guardians of the Galaxy with Jessica, it did it again. About every 30 seconds or so, the audio just cuts out for a few seconds. I moved the HDMI to another input on the AVM70, and that seems to have resolved the issue for now. What's difficult to determine is this an intermittent problem or is it an HDMI input issue on the Anthem itself? If I can get this one issue figured out, I will definitely consider replacing my Marantz AV7706 with the Anthem AVM70 8K. Now, when comparing pricing to other similar processors, the Anthem AVM70 8K falls in the more affordable options. The Marantz AV10 is $7,000. The Arcam AV41 is $5,250. The Monolith HTP1 is $4,000, and the Anthem AVM70 8K is $4,000. Now, although I would not consider this inexpensive, it's certainly one of the more affordable options if you're considering a 15 or maybe a 16 channel processor. Now, I'll leave a link to the Anthem AVM70 8K down in the description below, as well as Anthem's flagship processor, the AVM90 8K. As always, God bless, and we will catch you in the next video.